Welcome to folks who are just jumping on the line. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We're at 2 minutes after the hour, and we'll welcome folks to jump online as they get here.
Okay.
For anyone, just a reminder, if you can mute yourself, a couple housekeeping items as we get started. Today's session is being recorded. So feel free to do what you need to do to be comfortable. You can turn your camera on, off. We are spotlighting the speakers, so nobody should show up in the video, but just to let you know, we will be sharing the webinar out after the fact. My name is Jessie Beanstra. I'm the director for Farm to Cafeteria Canada. We're pleased to be hosting this conversation today. Basically, we're excited to host 4 graduate students, 3 of whom will be presenting today. We've got Bruna, Mary, and Mandrel that are going to talk to us about an 8-month project that they've been leading. A couple of housekeeping items just in terms of the flow. We are going to have about a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll have Q&A and discussion. I know many of you have really important and insightful contributions to this discussion. So in addition to sharing with you, I also look forward to hearing from you as part of the call today as well. Feel free to enter any questions you might have in the chat. And we will get to those after the presentation component. So just to get started here, moving us along, I'm going to give a quick introduction, but I want to first acknowledge I myself am joining from the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, today known as Vancouver, British Columbia. It's my pleasure to be joining you. We've had lots and lots of rain the last couple of days, which is very, very welcomed here. To kind of help things get a good start this growing season. And I welcome all of you to just take a moment to reflect on where you're joining from today. Feel free to share it in the chat if you like, and say hello. So some of you may be familiar with Farm to Cafeteria Canada, but for those who aren't, I'll just give a quick introduction. We are a national partnership-based organization that exists to transform how food is experienced, learned, and celebrated in all schools across Canada. And we work through kind of 4 strategic pillars just to give some context, and these aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but in terms of what we'll be focusing on today and this project sits more kind of in the informing policy camp. We're really interested in what we can do to create positive policy around local food procurement and distribution when it comes to schools in Ontario and also across Canada. And the work that we do is through what we refer to as a farm to school approach. And so this is really a comprehensive approach to school food where we have an emphasis on healthy local food in schools. So a focus of the conversation today, but also linking that to opportunities for hands-on learning and making curriculum connections for students with respect to food literacy and also food systems literacy. So understanding kind of the full scope of their position within the food system. And then really key to that is community partnerships to really bringing both of those things to life. And so when we talk about community partners, this can look different in every community, but it includes farmers and other local food producers and food system actors, as well as partners in NGOs, folks in public health, a variety of local small businesses, basically anyone that has a role to play within a school food system. And just a note, we commonly will use interchangeably local food to school, which is a preferred term in some communities that reflects food that comes from local food that comes from more than just farms. And this is just sort of a little example of the many ways that that can come to life. So you'll sometimes see local food to school, sea to school, farm to school, and that's sort of the context through which we approach our work. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Bruna to kick us off in this conversation.
Hello, everyone. It's amazing to have all of you with us today. My name is Bruna. I'm a first-year PhD student in geography at the University of Guelph, and I'm part of the student team that developed this project in partnership with Farm to Cafeteria Canada over the past year. The other members of our team that are here with us today are Mary and Mandro. Mary is a PhD candidate in environmental sciences at the University of Guelph, and Mandro is a PhD student in geography, also at the University of Guelph. And we also have, sadly, a master's student in animal biosciences that unfortunately wasn't able to join us today. Our team was brought together through the course Agri Food Innovation, led by Gina Rex, the Arrell Food Institute Education Coordinator, and Dr. Evan Fraser, professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Guelph. And in collaboration with Farm to Cafeteria Canada, our team was tasked with researching the following problem. Jesse, if you could move to the next slide. So identify the barriers to local school food procurement in Ontario for K-12 students. So the province of Ontario has a diverse landscape with many cultures and religions. And by focusing on it, we are gaining information from various environments. And also by focusing on K-12, we're also getting information from a large proportion of students. If you can move to the next slide, Jesse, please. There are a few reasons why we should be talking about this now. So first, schools in Canada are not designed with food in mind, and school food programs and how schools purchase food from them looks very different across the country, and even within provinces and territories and sub-regions. Second, public food procurement has been identified by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization as a game changer to promote more sustainable food systems, local procurement, and healthy diets. And finally, the government of Canada has committed to develop a national school food policy, and also more provincial and territorial governments are making investments in school food. So why should we care about this, and why is it so important? School food programs have several benefits, including ensuring that students have access to nutritious meals, contributing to their overall health, positive impacts on their academic performance, providing social equality by offering students quality meals regardless of their economic background, supporting families that cannot provide or prepare a proper meal for their kids to take to school every day, and providing a secure and defined market for local producers to sell their production. As you can see, all stakeholders are affected and should care about this matter, including producers, schools, students, families, and society in general. With that being said, identifying the barriers to local food procurement is the first step to support and to advocate for school food procurement policies and school food programs. I'll hand it over to Mary.
Oh, I think Bruna froze. You just froze there for a moment, Bruna. Can you just say the last part of your...
Sure. So with that being said, identifying the barriers to local food procurement is the first step to support and advocate for local food procurement policies and also for school food programs. And I'll hand it over to Mary.
Do we have... sorry folks, I'm just gonna interject here because I know Mary was having some trouble joining us and I'm not sure if she's managed to get online yet. So I don't see her. Mandrel, I'm wondering, did you want to pick up?
I got message from Mary. She is trying to connect with us.
Okay. Are you able to speak to her slides by chance?
Yeah, I can start.
And we'll keep an eye on to let her in.
Okay, so part of this project, we actually have committed to provide some deliverables. So initially we start with some literature review. So we identify the recent current trends of the school food program scenario across the global context as well as the Canadian context, and we identified the different kind of challenge to link with our project problem. Then we developed a stakeholder map for our project to identify the potential stakeholder who can engage throughout the process to implementing school food program. So we actually have conversation with our community partner as well as the other people who actually have knowledge on this area. And we had a successful roundtable that held in the winter. So we have different conversation with the different people regarding the school food program. And specifically, we had a chance to talk with the farmers and producers who actually have the different knowledge in the ground level. So that was very useful for our project. And we also prepared the final report. And one of the deliverables is this webinar that happening right now. So these are the project delivers from our work. Next slide, please. So final report actually focus on the conversation drawing from the different stakeholder interviews, funder, researcher, farmer, and distributors. So we try to categorize those information based on our project challenge that actually exists based on the procurement problem at the local level. So we also structured those based on our learning from the different category. And food and local coordinator survey also helped in this project. So we have sort of qualitative information that actually collected through the Google form survey. So it was useful to understand that ground level reality. So it supported our project goal to achieve smoothly. And Ontario's Farmers Roundtable was useful in the different dimension. We understand particularly the barriers and the opportunity we try to identify through the conversation. And already we identified different kind of information through our literature review, and roundtables discussion actually supplemented or visualized those things very clearly. So it was very useful for us. So one of the infographic, can you move that? One of the infographic was developed based on the FLC survey. So it actually identified the core information that come out from the FLC survey. Next slide, please. This is the one of the interesting thing we did during our roundtable. Actually, one of the visual artists supported us to visualize this thing throughout the discussion. So we actually visualize our whole project scenario throughout this visual art, so visual infographic. So we try to understand that how local farm are working with and what current opportunity and barriers exist in the local level, and what recommendation actually farmers or producer providing us to moving forward for the school food program across the Canada. Next slide, please. National School Food Program in Ontario. So we try to identify the different issues and the solutions. So first of all, focusing the connecting farmers. So it was one of our challenges. So local food program, we propose that the solution can be the local food procurement based on the enrollment can be happen. So it can support to connecting farmer in the different level. And second issue was identify the communicating with the schools through the food personnel, and we propose solution to that. Government and school board can appoint trained coordinators in school with knowledge of local food system and seasonal menu planning. And then issue identifies the online distribution of in-season goods, so online ordering system with already packaged good of those without infrastructure. So infrastructure can be implemented in this regard. And another issue about infrastructure investment as a solution is identified that retrofitting the schools and other community food asset with potential to serve the school to better receive, store, and prepare and serve the local food. And lastly, one issue identify the promoting education among the different stakeholders. So solution can be integrating of food and food system literacy into curriculum as well as extracurricular opportunity, for example, garden, food service, and offer agri food courses. Next slide, please. This was one of our course deliverables. So we enjoy to identify the barriers of procurement and distribution logistic and opportunity. We also share for the school food program. So it was actually happened throughout our literature review, different conversation with the different stakeholders, and we did interviews as well as roundtables. So is a summary of our 8-month project. You can say that because we invested lots of time to identify the core barrier that actually happening for the school food program. So we focus on like regulatory hurdles was the one of the issue for the barriers, that there were not a specific regulatory system established. Budget was the one of the key area that also hindered this program implementation, and there also identified the supply network, which is not very well established in the local level. Infrastructure and storage system also a key issue for the school food program, and coordination and communication is the lacking among the local level different kind of actors. So it actually hindered the whole process. And lastly, we focus on the preference and menu planning, which actually not synchronized or harmonized with the very specific thing. So it need to be considered for a school food program. And we also see identify different opportunity that local food procurement policy can be developed that could be support the school food program very specific way, so it can meet the need of the school food program very effective way. And farm to school program need to be established, which actually not visible at that time. So this kind of program is very much important to implement at the local level. And food hub and distribution network can establish to make more comprehensive way of this program. So they can establishing very effective way that food hub and local distribution network can support the local level school food program. And collaborative partnership is required with the producer, farmers, schools, and relevant actors at the local level, and community can be collaborate with this partnership. And capacity building and training also the opportunity that we can school food program might be needed at the local level. And public awareness and engagement required to make more understand that how school food program is important for the kids, and it's actually the future of different perspective for the upcoming generation. Next slide. So throughout our learning process, we actually learn different kind of thing through our activities and work process. So we just identify the different aspects that actually useful for to understand that how school food program actually obstacle and face challenges. So first thing, focus on the fragmented supply chain. Fragmentation in local food chain makes it hard to keep a consistent supply for school food program in Ontario. So we learned that successful program in Sweden and Brazil that use centralized buying system or network to link local farmers with the school. And one of the negative aspect was that there is a challenge in the availability of local food throughout the year can make it difficult to buy food all year round. To deal with this, it can be useful to use method of seasonal preservation like freezing or canning food during the season is available, or buying food from the different places to overcome this challenge. Cost is the one of the key consideration that buying local food might be cost more than the using regular ways of getting food. We are learned from the program in Sweden and Brazil that share costs, buying in large amount, or offer financial help to pro, procedure school. This program can help school support local farmer without spending too much money. In terms of positive aspect that we learned from this project, that the coalition from healthy school food and student nutrition Ontario, this kind of network and association have a strong association advocate for policy change in the funding invest to support the implementation of nutritious and local source food option in school meal program. And they're aiming to improve the health well-being of students across the province. And in terms of research and innovation, we identified that Arrell Food Institute, Simon Fraser University, University of Saskatchewan, they are playing pivotal roles in the generating evidence that supporting policy advocacy process and building a base for the discussion and relevant government for the successful implementation of the school food program. Overall, the school food program actually got a government funding to eliminate the obstacle and successfully implement the school food program effectively. Next slide, please. So this news is old, but we were excited. We just heard about this when we approaching to prepare for our final project presentation, that and that day we learned that the government has committed for the national school food program for the kids for success of the future, and they committed to with an investment 1 billion over the 5 years, and the program will included in the budget in 2024, and that will launch a target for provide meals 400,000 more kids every year. Thank you for your patience. So feel free if you have any question. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Mandrel and Bruna. And I'm so sorry Mary wasn't able to join us. I know she was having technical difficulties, but maybe she'll be able to pop on during the conversation. Yeah, and just huge thanks so much to all four of you, including Mary and Sedley, for all of your work. Just for folks' context, this wasn't necessarily an area that the student team had a lot of knowledge or background in, so it was a really steep learning curve to dive into a really complex issue, and they were fantastic, took it kind of head on, and it was a real pleasure to work with you over the last 8 months. So thank you for all of your work, and to all of the partners, and special shout out to Heather Toma as well from Student Nutrition Ontario Central East for all of her kind of mentorship over over the last several months, and of course to the University of Guelph and Arrell Food Institute and Food for Thought for allowing us to be part of this program. With that, I will stop sharing my slides so that we can see folks' faces if we want to open it up for some questions, discussion. Obviously, this is, as we said, a really complex issue, and I know many of you work in this space, and so it's really kind of at the starting point of this conversation, I would say, or early days of this conversation, which we hope to have more dialogue going forward. So there's great opportunity for any questions or suggestions, sharing of your own experience. We're happy to hear it. And I'm just gonna acknowledge that Mary has joined us. So thank you, Mary. We're so sorry to have missed you, but I'm glad you can be here for the discussion. Did you want to just say hello and introduce yourself? I'm not sure.
I don't see our mic next to Mary's name, and so there might be other technical challenges, but
Audio issues. Okay. We will try again, but hopefully Mary can see us. And if you want to say hello in the chat, if you can hear us, Mary, feel free to contribute in the chat as well.
Just have one thing I wanted to mention too, is which I think was on the final slide, is that there is a website portal that's being set up that has the literature review and a lot of the resources that were created during the project that will be publicly available. So you'll be able to go back and look more in depth at all the work that was done. Just want to mention that.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Yeah, so we'll send an email out after today's call with a link to the project webpage as well. Any questions or reflections, experiences anyone wants to share based on your own context or position in this space? Or suggestions for next steps? I think maybe while folks are pondering, because I know that it was a lot of information, one of the things that was I think really exciting for us with this project is that it was really the first opportunity, at least to our knowledge, to really meaningfully bring together farmers working in this space of representing different scales of farms and different products. And I know I would love to see more conversations involving the producer side. And in particular, I think what we heard with that conversation is also just that lack of kind of communication channel between producers and schools, and understanding what each other's needs are and also what they can offer. So that's something that I'm excited to dig into deeper. And I don't know if and to continue those conversations, but I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or would also like to see that, or suggestions around next steps related to that. Quiet bunch.
I have a question.
Yeah, Leela?
Thanks. When you think of policy, like when you say local food procurement frameworks or supportive policies, who do you have in mind? Like, I know all levels of government have to be involved in different ways. Obviously, the funding for the national program is federal. It will be implemented provincially. Education is handled provincially, and a lot of programs are handled at the community level. So where do you see effective policy being developed, like at what levels and by what actors, like the ministry or school boards or individual communities, or where do you see policy fitting in at the different levels?
Excellent question. Bruna or Mandrel, did you have any thoughts on that?
I can share my own view. I think as government already committed to funding the school food program, so first of all, I think it should be developed in the national level, but they should have focus and address the different level, like provincial level and the local level. They need to consider while they're developing the policy. So I think, I'm not sure, but I think in certain way it can reduce the gaps in between, and still we need to more focus on that how this program going well, because we know that this is the first time for the government they will implement such kind of program in Canada. So still there will be the process of learning or implementing the thing or alternating the thing gradually.
Bruna, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with Manjuro. I think we obviously need a unique national federal program that unifies all provinces under the same opportunities for school food. But I think one thing that I took from our discussions, especially from the roundtable and from individual interviews, is that we also need something to support these interactions in the local level, especially connecting farmers and school boards. So I'm not sure how this would happen in practice, but it's definitely a necessity that we perceived while doing our research.
Yeah, I think like as having been a farmer for 10 years, it would be really great to see this funding come with like requirements to implement local. Like, I don't know if the federal government would have a policy that said, you know, in order to get the full amount of funding, you have to show us that you're procuring 10% local, or some kind of like, you know, you get a bonus, you get, I don't know, like some way of rewarding the school boards that are making the effort to procure local. And then it would be like a set criteria across the board that everybody would be striving for. And it's hard because I know like it's such a big learning curve for everybody to get this program off the ground. And you don't want to like hinder it and make it too complicated. But at the same time, if we don't set those criteria now that local has to be incorporated, then it's going to be much harder to later once they've developed relationships with the big producers and suppliers. So it really is an opportunity now to like incorporate local into the system. So it's great that you're doing this work now.
Thank you.
My
Yeah,
sense.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, my sense is that there are definitely models in the US at the state level. I feel like it's definitely working that way, and it feels like it makes a huge difference. So I think that's one of the things that I was thinking of is, are there possibilities for us to field trip and just go in, or just, you know, have more conversations with the northern US states where things are happening, because I think there's a lot of potential to learn there, as well as like other countries that the researchers mentioned, but I think, yeah, right in the US as well.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Yeah, I agree. I think multiple levels, and part of like our work to figure out is, I think through some, whether it's pilot programs, but really having those targets set federally and some guidelines from the get-go, and then opportunities to implement it and look at what kind of policies are practical at a local level to actually facilitate that to happen. And yeah, I think definitely learning from folks south of the border as well as in other jurisdictions would be an exciting next step. I know that there's in New Hampshire right now, they've been working hard on a bill to incentivize local procurement. So it essentially subsidizes the purchase of local food for schools while paying farmers a fair rate for the food that they're procuring. And so I think piloting something like that, which might be a regional or provincial kind of level of policy. So I think it really is kind of at all levels. And I see Wendy has raised a hand. Oh, you're just muted, Wendy.
In healthcare, we specifically don't contract produce because most facilities fall under threshold to require an open, transparent tender. So you can do invitational procurement, and then you have to be intentional with who you invite. It's as simple as that. For the other things, the new Bobby legislation in the province of Ontario really opens the door to look at local procurement. It's the bill itself looks pretty onerous and has some challenges on reporting and such for large organizations such as ourselves, but it also intentionally seeks provincial benefit in your procurement practice. So, but I would caution when you're looking at local procurement that you share risk. So the challenge here is, you know, a farmer is not going to take from one customer and give it to you. You need to have some committed volume. You need to put some skin in the game in order to shift that market. But I would agree that that the policy landscape is good for local procurement, particularly for schools as you're starting out. You know, in healthcare, we're fighting the old way isn't broken, let's not change it. Whereas you guys are starting fresh in a new environment of collaboration, and if you do it with intention, I think you can really set the stage for the other public services.
That makes me think about, I know the city of Peterborough is speaking about social procurement policy for the city. They don't purchase a lot of food right now for the city institutions, but to have an example like schools where it is consistent, we are serving hundreds of thousands of meals every single day, so it really can provide something consistent and predictable in terms of contracts. So I think, yeah, there is a lot of potential. And even if the city isn't purchasing food, they're modeling the direction that we want to be going. And so we can help them to have successes basically within, give them examples of how they can achieve what they're trying to achieve. So yeah, that feels encouraging. And I don't know where others specifically are across the province, but that's an interesting question that we might be able to look at, is where are those municipal policies already in place, and then see how we can, again, communicate to help achieve those.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, really thoughtful. I think one of the things that came up for us too in our conversations, and Heather and others on the call that are involved with this, I'm curious if you have anything to share just about, I think, the number of like low-hanging fruit, so to speak, in terms of the types of things that could be really good, where we can kind of set those targets for like fruit and vegetable programs, for instance. So things like apples and carrots and cucumbers, like a lot of the handheld type things that we know are readily available, and many of which also store well. Heather or others, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I know there's some other food and logistics coordinators on the line, so maybe I'll just invite any of them to speak about existing experience that they already have, or other ideas.
Hi, Heather, and everyone else. I just wanted to remind people to always ask what is possible. So we dealt with a local orchard for years and years and years for one of our student nutrition programs. And then we started working with a distributor. And I didn't want to lose that contact with the local orchard, but I also knew that it was going to be a hindrance for her to do the last mile delivery. So I just asked the distributor, is there any way that you can pick up those products and supply them only for our programs? And very willingly they did that. So if there's any kind of idea that you have in order to get that local food out, I say don't hesitate to ask. I think majority of people are supportive of getting local out and into our schools. So they might be a little bit more willing to help, to at least to start.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really good and inspiring reminder.
And yeah, just to further expand upon that, I would think that that's very similar in our region, Central West. We sort of have connections with local farmers, but the individual school purchase is that connection, as opposed to zooming out a little bit further and making that connection between the farmers and maybe local S&P distributors is probably a more effective route in some cases to increase some of that, but also establishing baselines or processes that aren't time consuming to the farmers or others involved to allow that collection of data or sharing of information has also been a little bit challenging in our area. So again, systematic changes or I guess differences across some of those farms also will have an impact.
Yeah, thank you. Kathy, did you have something you wanted to add?
was just gonna say that I'm not sure if Kathy, while Kathy's trying, I'm just gonna briefly say, Sherry's example reminded me that one of the things that's been in terms of partnerships is with sort of middle level distribution companies. So not super small and not really big, but those that are large enough to have capacity and small enough to be able to make independent decisions. And I know there's some on the call today as well. So in various regions, I think we've found some really good examples of that. Produce Express and Finley Foods and lots of others. So just encouraging, like Sherry said, asking the questions and in the places where we think there might be ability to be flexible in policies. So yeah, thanks to those middle level distributors. And I think similarly with the producers, finding that middle level where there is capacity and willingness to expand, but not so large that everything is already really set and rigid.
Yeah, thanks. There's just, I feel like so much richness in terms of opportunities to explore and some of the ideas coming out here just with respect to distribution and size of farmers. Certainly that was a big thing that came up even amongst like we heard from some of the farmers that attended the roundtable that they were only like it wasn't even a huge kind of footprint that their farm had, but they were only growing sort of 50% of their capacity because they didn't have a market for it. And so I think figuring out how we can make some of those linkages and maximize their potential, but then also providing an opportunity for some of those smaller scale farmers and maybe through aggregation or food hubs, like how do we tap into some of those and just working with some of those smaller distributors. Lots of potential to explore there. And I think lots of continued conversations and engagement and also piloting some of these things will be kind of how we can learn to inform some of that policy going forward. Bruna and Mandrel, is this bringing up any other ideas or reflections for either of you?
One thing I would say that as the school food program will be the new process of work for the government. So I think there need to be develop very specific program to monitoring and evaluation or assessing this program periodic basis because I believe there will be some scope to learning to implement this program very effective way. So if there face any challenges or any obstacles, so that need to be documented. And from those challenges, it is very important to learn the scope that how can government bridge those gaps so school food program can run smoothly for future.
Yeah, and I think all of this just brings me to the importance of doing more research like this that we're doing, especially to investigate solutions that maybe already exist in other places in the world, and then we can just take the example and follow here in Canada. I'm from Brazil, so I know there's a lot of successful school food programs there, and many other countries that we can follow the example and just make a better school food program for Canada.
Thanks. Yeah, certainly we look to Brazil for a lot of good examples. So any other questions or reflections before we wrap up, folks? Well, thank you so much for your interest in joining us today. we'll hang out on the line for a few more minutes if anyone has any questions. But I'll just say in terms of next steps, yeah, we're still kind of digging deep into all of the details and that the student team has uncovered, and we'll be using that to kind of help inform next steps. But invite anyone to reach out if you have any questions or ideas, or interested in kind of piloting some of these things. Especially, you know, the best way to know where the opportunities are is kind of where there's sort of windows of folks in certain communities that we can kind of pilot initiatives and see how it works. So please feel free to reach out. As a follow-up, and I see Jana's note there, yes, we absolutely were going to send a follow-up email with a link to the recording as well as the project webpage, where, as Heather mentioned, we'll link some of the blogs and different resources and things developed out of this. And then if anyone's interested in kind of staying informed in the conversation going forward, I think we'll circulate a contact list as well. So if you're interested in participating in any future kind of roundtable surveys, things to kind of help inform this work going forward, please feel free to add your name to that list. We'd be glad to stay in touch.